Hello everyone, this is Redden from Tempest, and I'm here to provide another strategy guide for Star Wars The Old Republic. This time, we'll be looking at the second encounter in the new Scum and Villainy operation, Titan 6. This fight takes place in a room filled with lots of player-sized rocks that are used to line of sight one of the mechanics. Titan 6 is a two-phase encounter where the first phase is heavily scripted, meaning the boss will keep going through the same ability rotation over and over. The second phase starts when the boss is brought below 20% HP and is basically just a burn phase. Before we get into the finer details, I'd like to remind you that this footage was taken on one of the early patch 2.0 builds on the Star Wars test server. That means that the encounters are still regularly being tweaked to slightly change values and mechanics, and we actually experienced some of these changes during our clears of the operation. If the fight changes significantly by the time it goes live, we'll revise our strategy and re-release an updated guide which reflects the changes. At this point, however, we feel that the fight is stable enough to release a guide. So, here we go. As I said previously, Titan 6's first phase is heavily scripted. We initiate the pull and keep him tanked facing his left shoulder throughout the entire phase due to his cleave ability. He also casts a stun on the primary tank, which, on the most recent PTS build, lasts for around 18 seconds. I'll get back to this ability shortly. The first significant mechanic is that he casts an ability called Lots of Missiles. This is unavoidable raid-wide splash damage that just needs to be healed through. The key is to not stand near anyone so that the splash damage doesn't get out of hand. Shortly after Lots of Missiles, the boss will cast an ability named Airstrike. This causes red circles to appear on the ground, and players will have 1 to 2 seconds to move out of them to avoid some moderate damage. The red circles end in an explosion, which sometimes causes adds named Titan probes to spawn. These need to be rounded up by the off-tank and AoE'd down by a ranged DPS since they don't have too much health. After the airstrike, the boss places a huge grenade on the primary tank. This is indicated by a massive red circle under the tank, which you can see me take away from the raid and tuck away into a cliff. The debuff lasts for around 7 seconds, and when it finishes, the bomb nukes the tank for around 15,000 health. As an assassin, shrouding this ability makes the fight significantly easier. After the grenade, the boss recasts Lots of Missiles. Just stay spread, same as before. Immediately after this second missiles phase, the boss will cast his final scripted mechanic, named Launch. This will cause the boss to relocate to the next position in the room. The actual launch causes a sort of wave to ripple out from where the boss was standing. Players are supposed to line of sight this using the rocks in the room or else be one-shot by the shiny wave of death. To facilitate the line of sight mechanic, each rock gets a sort of safe zone graphic that appears when the launch is happening. Moving to this area will cause your character to kneel and be immobilized for the duration of the launch. Keep in mind that you can still cast abilities while you're immobilized, so feel free to catch up on healing or finish off those final Titan probes in this time. Also note that only one player may hide behind each rock. Some guilds prefer to assign specific rocks to specific players, but I personally recommend just winging it and adapting on the fly. The scripted sequence is repeated again in the new location that the boss is launched to. Tank him to his left to avoid the cleave, and allow an easier kite to the next location. Spread out for the Lots of Missiles phase. Avoid the ground circles on the ground and make sure that you clean up the Titan probes that follow. Make sure that the huge grenade hits only the primary tank, who should mitigate it if he can. Prep for another Lots of Missiles phase, and then find a cozy rock to hide behind for the next launch. This keeps repeating until the boss hits 20% health and is pushed into phase 2. But before we talk about that, let me backtrack a bit. Remember the stun mechanic I said I'd get back to earlier? Well, the idea is that it always syncs up with the Lots of Missiles ability cast. The significance of this is that the boss will switch away from the main tank, who now receives a 200% damage increased buff, or debuff, for the duration of the actual stun, and attack the next aggro target. At this point, the off-tank should taunt the boss to keep the damage on him, but he needs to be mindful of the cleave. Allow me to go into a bit more depth regarding this stun mechanic. As of right now, an assassin tank can spec into an ability or a talent called Avoidance, which reduces the cooldown of the 2-minute CC break to a 1.5 minute CC or 1.5 minute cooldown. The way this helps in this particular mechanic is that as an assassin tank, I don't need to have an off-tank taunt off of me for the first few iterations because the cooldown on my CC break is so short. The reason it lining up with lots of missiles is a happy coincidence is that it allows for about 6 extra seconds of leniency so that I can wait for the cooldown of my CC break. This is likely to be the only mechanic that will change between now and live. I expect that if they do change it, they will make it such that you can't dispel the 200% damage taken debuff by dispelling the stun by using a CC break, thus forcing a tank swap. This shouldn't be a big deal really. Just have the tanks swap off tasks and you should be fine. One more side note is that on the current PTS build, the third launch location seems to have a bit of a scripting hiccup. Instead of going through lots of missiles, then an airstrike, then a huge grenade on the tank, the boss seems to prefer to go through lots of missiles, then a grenade, then an airstrike. It doesn't really change much, and I honestly think that it's just a minor glitch, but my OCD compels me to at least mention it in this guide. As for Phase 2, upon reaching 20% health, the boss will transform into a cannon of sorts, causing flame damage to people close to him and casting the same lots of missiles ability on people who are far away. The best way to handle this, from our experience, is to just heal through it and push the DPS hard. Keep the raid spread so that you avoid the splash damage and make sure that everyone is within healing range. But make sure also to buff your healers with any abilities you can, such as your Assassin Shelter or using some of your defensives to mitigate some of the damage. Another thing to note is that on the latest PTS build, he seems to like to randomly pull people into his melee range in Phase 2. If this happens, just run back to your positions and continue your tasks. That's it for this fight, guys. Please remember to like and subscribe if you found this content useful, and be sure to visit us on our website at tempestguild.org and check out our other media outlets. If you have any positive or negative comments or any questions, please feel free to post them below or to contact me in-game if you find yourself on the Prophecy of the Five server. Enjoy!